Welcome back. Today, we are looking at a script for a YouTube video from the channel Megabuilds. It's called The Tallest Buildings Ever Proposed, and it compares these massive, unbuilt structures.
I'm ready. This is a huge topic, literally.
So let's jump right in. A key theme running through this, or maybe an issue, is this very strict adherence to a linear numerical progression. It just goes by height, which creates this repetitive listicle rhythm that really risks losing the audience.
Oh, I saw that right away. It's the classic YouTube format, right? The countdown.
Exactly.
You start at 10 and you go to 1. It's logical, I get it. But I don't know, is there a risk that by focusing only on the math, 1,000 meters, then 1,001, then 1,050, the whole thing just starts to feel a bit mechanical?
It definitely does. The argument here is that the transitions between the buildings become so predictable. You see phrases like, up next, or we now reach, and it just feels like someone's reading a spreadsheet out loud.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate for a second. Viewers love a ranking. They want to know who the winner is. If we break up that linear order, don't we risk confusing people about which building is actually the tallest?
That's a fair point. But I think the trade-off is viewer retention. If you just list 20 buildings, by the time you hit number 7, they all start to blur together. The big suggestion here is to restructure the list, to group buildings by a narrative theme instead of just pure height.
So group them by story, not by stats.
Precisely. Let's take the Middle Eastern project. Right now, you've got the Obelisko Capitali in Egypt, the Burj Mubarak Al Kabir, and then the Jeddah Tower. But they're all separated in the script by projects from Azerbaijan and China, just to keep the height order.
Right, I see that. It's totally disjointed. You're jumping from Egypt to Azerbaijan, then to China, then you're back in Kuwait.
Exactly. Now imagine if we put those 3 Middle Eastern projects together. You could frame that whole section as a kind of regional arms race for the sky. You've got Egypt trying to echo its ancient glory, Kuwait honoring folklore with the 1,001-meter height, and Saudi Arabia, which is the only one that actually started building.
Oh, that's so much more interesting if you put them side by side. You're not just listing buildings. You're telling a story about, a specific geopolitical moment. It becomes about ambition and rivalry.
And that keeps the viewer hooked. They want to know who wins that specific battle. And I saw another massive opportunity with the design lineage. The script mentions Frank Lloyd Wright's The Illinois.
Right, and how it inspired the Burj Khalifa.
Yes, but then much later it mentions it also inspired the Aeropolis 2001 in Japan.
I caught that too. But right now, the Illinois is at 1,760 meters, and Aeropolis is at 2001. So there are 3 or 4 other random projects sitting between them.
It just kills the momentum of that idea. The suggestion is to put the Illinois right next to Aeropolis 2001 and the Sky Mile Tower. Explicitly link the fates of these ideas.
So instead of saying, next up is the Aeropolis, you could say something like, Frank Lloyd Wright's dream didn't die in Chicago. It migrated across the ocean to Tokyo Bay.
Exactly. That's a hook. You're showing the viewer these aren't just isolated drawings. They're part of this long, multi-generational conversation between arcs. It turns a list into a lineage.
That brings up a question of tone, though, because some of these are really serious projects, like Jeddah Tower, where they actually poured concrete. And then you have the Dutch Mountain.
The Dutch Mountain. Yes.
I have to admit, I hit that part of the script and I almost stopped reading. It feels like a prank. It's a joke proposal from a journalist, and it's sitting right next to these incredible engineering feats.
It's total tonal whiplash, isn't it? You're in this mindset of, wow, look at the engineering. And then suddenly you're looking at a piece of satire.
So how do you fix that without just cutting it? I mean, it is a pretty funny story.
You group them by intent. You could create a section called something like the visionary versus the scam, or maybe the dreamers versus the jokers. Contrast the serious projects against the ones that were just publicity stunts.
That's smart. You could put the Jeddah Tower, the tragic one that stalled, right next to the Azerbaijan Tower, which, it ended with an arrest?
It did.
That creates an emotional rhythm. You go from the tragedy of the real to the absurdity of the fake. That variety keeps your brain so much more engaged than just 1,000 meters, 1,100 meters, 1,200 meters.
And once you start grouping them like that, another issue becomes really clear. The script depends so heavily on the visuals to do all the work. It's constantly saying, as you can see here, or this 3D render shows.
Which is standard for video, sure. But is there a risk that if you're only focused on the show, you're forgetting the power of the tell?
That's the second big critique. The descriptions of the buildings themselves are, well, they're functional, not evocative. The script gives you facts, height, location, but it misses the chance to describe the experience or the texture of these places.
It assumes the viewer is glued to the screen. But we know people listen to these videos in the background, right? While they're doing dishes or driving. If I look away from the screen, all I'm hearing is a list of numbers.
Exactly. So the suggestion is to really enhance the descriptive language, to paint a theater of the mind. Use sensory details to describe the scale so the script can stand on its own, even without the animation.
Okay, let's use the Bionic Tower as an example. The script says it mimics tree roots, has air cushions, and that the maximum sway is 2.45 meters, which is just a statistic.
Right, 2.45 meters. In the context of a kilometer-high tower, it almost sounds small.
But hang on, think about that. 2.45 meters is 8 feet. Imagine you're in your living room on the 300th floor. A storm rolls in. The floor under you doesn't just vibrate. It physically travels 8 feet to the left, and then it swings 8 feet back to the right.
That is actually terrifying.
It's a slow, sickening pendulum. If the script described that feeling, the vertigo, the liquid in your coffee cup sloshing from side to side, then suddenly I don't need to see the render. I can feel it in my stomach.
That's the difference between a spec sheet and a story. Okay, what about the Obelisko Capitol in Egypt? The script says it has rotating horizontal slats to reduce heat.
Again, super functional. It sounds like an HVAC manual.
Right, slats to reduce heat. But visually, what does that do? If the whole building is covered in these slats that are tracking the sun, the building isn't static anymore. It's alive.
It would look like it's breathing.
Exactly. Describe that movement. Say that from a distance, the stone obelisk appears to shimmer or ripple in the desert heat as thousands of these slats turn together. That's an image that sticks in your mind whether you're looking at the screen or not.
I love that. A shimmering mirage made of stone. That is good writing. Okay, what about the big one? The Shimizu Megacity Pyramid. The script says it's made of 204 smaller pyramids, which is accurate, but it's also very dry. It's hard to even visualize 204 pyramids.
So how would you describe it?
I'd use a metaphor. Call it a fractal hive, or maybe a crystallized mountain, and describe the negative space. The script mentions that skyscrapers are sort of floating inside the hollow parts of the truss.
That's the key image.
So describe looking up from inside that pyramid. You're standing in a park, on the ground, and you look up, and there's an entire city block floating a mile above your head, just suspended in this geometric web. That gives me the scale in a way that 204 pyramids never ever could.
And this leads us right into the third critique, which is all about context. We're throwing around these huge numbers. 204 pyramids, 10,000 meters, $22 trillion. The material does a great job listing them, but it often leaves them as these totally abstract figures.
This is the so what factor. We are dealing with numbers so big that the human brain just can't really comprehend them. The script mentions the Tokyo Tower of Babel is taller than Mount Everest by a kilometer, which is good. That's a great start. But other stats, like the population or the cost, they just float there without any anchor.
The weakness is that a number like $22 trillion is so big it just becomes meaningless noise. The suggestion is to anchor these stats in something relatable, in human experience, or, I don't know, comparative economics, to make the mind-boggling scale actually feel real.
Let's take that Tokyo Tower of Babel cost again, $22 trillion. The script notes it's a quarter of world GDP.
Which is huge, but GDP is still a pretty abstract economic term for most people.
It is. So let's deepen it. Tell us that $22 trillion isn't just a lot of money, it's enough to fund entire countries for decades. But I think the physical resource cost is even more interesting.
You mean the actual materials?
Yes. Ask the viewer the question, where does the steel come from? Is there even enough steel on planet Earth to build a 10,000-meter tower? If we actually built this, would the price of a car double because we used up the global supply of iron ore?
That turns a fantasy drawing into a genuine logistical nightmare. It makes the impossibility feel very, very real.
And speaking of nightmares, let's talk about the Exceed 4000. That's the 4-kilometer-high mountain building. The script mentions the upper floors would need to be pressurized to avoid altitude sickness.
Right, but it just breezes past that point so quickly. Pressurized to avoid altitude sickness. It sounds like a little safety feature.
But think about what that means. If your room is pressurized, you can never open a window.
Oh, you're right. You're basically living in a spaceship.
Or an airplane cabin that never lands. You have to expand on that so what element. Describe the life of a resident there. You wake up, you're the king of the world. You're looking down on Mount Fuji. But you are trapped inside a sealed capsule. You can't smell the air. You can't feel a breeze. That tension between the infinite view and the claustrophobia, that is fascinating.
It changes the whole tone from, wow, cool building, to, would I actually want this?
Exactly. And that's what keeps people talking in the comments. And the script also mentions the time-squared 3015 proposal. It says it has a mountain range and a redwood forest inside.
A redwood forest inside a building. It sounds incredible.
It sounds cool, but is it real? Redwoods need a huge amount of water and sunlight and fog. How does sunlight even reach the center of a megastructure that's thousands of feet wide?
So the suggestion is to actually question the feasibility of these things?
Yes. Don't just list the features, critique them. Say something like, it proposes a redwood forest, but keeping a tree that big alive inside a steel box is an engineering challenge, even bigger than the building itself. You have to treat the audience like they're intelligent. They know this is science fiction. Help them pick it apart.
That critical lens really helps ground the whole video. And that brings us to our final critique, the narrative arc and, well, the ending.
The ending in the current draft is, it's just so abrupt.
It really is. We escalate all the way to the Tokyo Tower of Babel, the biggest thing ever imagined, a structure that challenges God. And then it just immediately drops to, I'm excited to read your comments and subscribe.
It's like running a marathon, crossing the finish line, and then immediately just sitting down on the pavement. There's no cool down. It feels totally incomplete.
The weakness is that there is no synthesis. There's no summary of the journey we just went on. The suggestion here is to create a proper conclusion that synthesizes the video's content and offers a final thought on the psychology behind all these proposals.
We need to ask the big question. Why? Why does humanity keep drawing these impossible things? Is it hubris? Is it a necessity? Is it just art?
You could summarize the trend we were talking about earlier.
Right. Recap that progression. We went from the real with the Jeddah Tower to the absurd with the Dutch Mountain, and then all the way to the science fiction of the Tower of Babel. And you can conclude that as technology advances, the line between those categories is starting to blur.
And connect the motivation. The Illinois was about proof of concept. The Sky Mile Tower was a response to climate change. The Khazar Islands were about diversifying an economy away from oil.
That's the synthesis. You could say something like, we used to build tall to show off corporate power, but when you look at the Sky Mile Tower, it seems like the future of the skyscraper isn't about vanity, it's about survival.
That's a powerful closing thought. We used to build for ego. Now we build to survive. That elevates the entire video.
It gives the viewers something to chew on after the video ends. And speaking of the end, that call to action really needs some work too.
Comment below is pretty standard, I guess.
It's white noise. Everyone says it. We need to ask a specific question that comes from the content we just discussed.
Something like the Exceed example?
Yes. Ask them, would you be willing to live in the pressurized top floor of the Exceed 4000, never able to open a window, just to say you lived in the tallest building on Earth?
That forces the viewer to put themselves in the scenario. It prompts a real yes or no debate in the comments.
And it proves they watched the whole video. It rewards the attentive viewer and it'll boost engagement so much more than a generic, let me know what you think.
So let's just recap the main critiques for Lewis and this mega build script. First, break that listicle format.
Stop counting from 1 to 10. Group the buildings by narrative themes, regional rivalries, design lineages, the real versus the fake. Tell a story, don't just read a spreadsheet.
Second, focus on theater of the mind.
Yeah, don't just rely on, as you can see. Describe the sway, the shimmer, the claustrophobia. Make the listener feel the building, not just see a render of it.
Third, anchor those abstract statistics in some kind of human reality.
Don't just give us a price tag. Tell us what that money actually means. Don't just say it's pressurized. Tell us what it would feel like to live in a sealed tube a mile in the sky.
And finally, you have to stick the landing.
Synthesize the journey. Give us a philosophical takeaway on why humanity is so obsessed with reaching for the stars. And then ask a specific, challenging question to drive the conversation.
Louise, the research you have here is fantastic. The selection of buildings is great, the facts are all solid, but by applying these storytelling techniques, the thematic grouping, the descriptive imagery, finding that human context, You can transform this from a simple size comparison video into a really compelling documentary about human ambition.
The content is absolutely there. It just needs that narrative glue to hold it all together. I really, really want to see the version of this video where I can feel that bionic tower swaying.
We invite you to apply these changes and submit the next draft for another review. We would love to see how you elevate the storytelling to match the height of these incredible towers. Thanks for listening.